CEO left her for his first love's call. She walked away. Now he's full of regret. The city wasn't quite awake yet. Atlanta mornings have a way of stretching themselves slowly. Traffic still hushed, streetlights fading one by one, the sky waiting to decide whether it wanted to be blue or stay gray a little longer. Soft rain tapped the apartment window like it was trying to say something Stella didn't want to hear. She stood in the living room barefoot, holding Marcus's suit jacket against her chest. It was still warm from his body, still carrying the faint scent of the cologne he always wore to early board meetings. Still familiar, too familiar. But for some reason this morning, it felt like holding something that belonged to a stranger. Stella couldn't explain it, but something inside her felt off, wrong in a quiet way, wrong in a way she could feel down in her bones. She wasn't dramatic. She wasn't the type to assume the worst. But as she held that jacket and listened to the soft rain, her heart felt heavier than the morning light should allow. Marcus walked past her. He didn't touch her waist. He always did. Every morning before work. Every morning, without fail, his hand brushed her waist or lingered for a moment, a silent way of saying, "I see you. I'm here." Not today. Today he moved around her like she was furniture he needed to avoid bumping into. The space he left behind felt colder than the rain outside. Stella blinked, trying to steady herself. It was such a small thing, a missing gesture, but it hit her harder than an argument, because she knew what that kind of silence meant. A man's body always speaks before his mouth does, and Marcus's body was telling her something she wasn't ready to hear. His spirit had already stepped away from her. Her throat tightened. She set the suit jacket down on the couch, hands trembling not from fear but from a truth she couldn't yet name. Hey family, if this moment hits you already, tap that like button and leave a comment. It helps this story reach someone who might need to hear it today. Marcus's phone rang, a sharp sudden sound that sliced through the soft rhythm of the rain. He froze, just for half a second, but Stella caught it, caught the way his shoulders tensed, caught the way his breath stalled, caught the way he stared at the screen like it held a version of his life he'd tried to forget. And then his expression changed. Not joy, not guilt, not shock alone. It was a mix, nostalgia, longing, confusion, something close to fear, all crashing together in his eyes. He stepped away from Stella, farther into the kitchen, almost hiding. His voice dropped low as he answered, like he didn't want the words to travel. Hello. There was a tremble in it, a softness she hadn't heard in years, a softness that didn't belong to her. Stella stood still, rain behind her, silence around her, heartbreak blooming inside her chest in slow, painful waves. She didn't cry, she didn't move, but she whispered, barely audible, not meant for Marcus, not meant for anyone except the part of her that already feared the truth. Who was she before me, and why does she still have this power? The rain pressed harder against the window. The apartment felt smaller, and the story she thought she was living, the life she believed they were building, suddenly felt like something fragile enough to crack with one phone call. Because sometimes the real question isn't whether someone loves you. It's whether love is enough to keep them from reaching back toward the past they never fully let go. What do you do when love is no longer enough to keep someone from slipping back into their past? Welcome to Mr. Graham Family, where real stories teach real lessons. Every video carries a truth, a moment of clarity, or a reminder of what matters most. If you're new here, subscribe and stay close. Before you watch, like the video and drop a comment with the time and where you're tuning in from. This family reaches far. Atlanta had fully woken up by the time Stella stepped onto the small balcony attached to their apartment. The rain from earlier had softened into a thin mist that clung to the railing, coating it with a shine that caught the morning light. Cars hummed far below, and the scent of wet pavement mixed with the faint aroma of someone frying bacon a few floors down. She pulled her robe tighter around herself, not because she was cold, but because her chest still felt unsettled from the moment inside. The moment Marcus walked past her without that small, familiar touch. It amazed her how something so gentle, something most people wouldn't even notice, could feel like a door closing inside her heart. She leaned on the railing, eyes scanning the buildings around her, thinking about where she came from. Stella had been raised in the heart of Atlanta. Not the polished downtown area, but the neighborhoods where life felt warm and lived in, where Sundays meant crowded kitchens, laughter over the sound of pots clattering, and aunties saying the kind of things that weren't meant to sound wise but always were. Baby, pay attention to how somebody loves you when life gets quiet, they used to tell her. It's easy to show up when things are loud. And today, Life felt too quiet. Her childhood shaped her. The beauty salons where she learned how strong women carry themselves, the cookouts full of music and cousins dancing even when they couldn't stay on beat, the simple pride in watching her mother work 2 jobs yet still somehow find joy in the smallest things. Those roots made Stella soft in the places that mattered and unbreakable in the places people didn't see. She breathed slowly, trying to steady her emotions. Her dreams had always been simple but precious, a loving home, a partner who saw her, a life filled with honesty, warmth, and mutual respect. Marcus had seemed like all of that, and more. He came from a different world entirely, a world of clean lines, quiet rooms, and planned futures. His family wasn't cruel, but they believed in perfection the way some people believed in prayer. His father expected excellence, his mother expected composure, and Marcus had learned early on that affection should be tidy and emotions neatly folded. Dating someone like him wasn't easy at first, not because he didn't care, but because caring didn't come naturally to him. He showed love through consistency, reliability, stability, everything she admired, but emotion, vulnerability, those were harder for him. Still, despite their cultural differences, they had built something real over the years. Their love grew from long talks at night, from moments where he let the world fall away long enough to laugh with her, from quiet dinners on the couch after long days, from the way he held her tighter when he fell asleep. But subtle cracks had been forming lately, nothing dramatic, just little shifts. He had been distracted, distant at times, lost somewhere in thoughts he didn't share. And Stella, who had grown up watching the women around her read relationships like scripture, could tell something was changing. She walked back inside and picked up the suit jacket she had placed on the couch earlier. She smoothed her hand over the fabric, remembering how she used to help him straighten it before work, remembering how he used to smile at her like she was the calm in his storm. He used to look at her like she was home. Now, he looked through her sometimes, like he was searching for something and didn't know what. She sat on the edge of the couch and drew a slow breath. A moment of softness crept into her chest, the kind that made her honest with herself. The truth was simple. She knew she loved Marcus more deeply than she ever intended to love anyone, and she feared losing him more than she'd ever admit out loud. Stella had dreams of marriage, of building a family rooted in mutual effort and affection. She imagined him being the father who showed up early to school events, the partner who didn't shy away from tough conversations, the husband who made a home feel like partnership instead of duty. But she had also sensed Marcus battling something within himself, something he never spoke about. Sometimes she caught him staring at nothing, eyes unfocused, as if he was listening to a memory she didn't have access to. Other times he held her but felt a world away. And now, after the way he brushed past her this morning, those quiet doubts felt heavier. She pressed her palm to her forehead and whispered, "Lord, don't let me be imagining things. Not about him, not about us." Her phone buzzed on the table, just a reminder from her calendar, but even that made her jump. Her emotions were too close to the surface, too raw from a morning she hadn't yet explained. The apartment door opened a crack. Marcus stepped halfway inside again. He had forgotten his coffee mug. He glanced at her for only a second before looking away. There was something tired in his expression, something guarded. "Did you need anything?" she asked softly, voice steady but her heart trembling underneath. "No, I'm fine," he replied, forcing a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. He picked up the mug and left again. The silence he left behind sat with her. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was changing something inside her. She closed her eyes and whispered to the stillness, "Please don't let this be what I think it is." Because deep down, Stella felt the shift. She felt the distance. She felt the quiet beginning of something breaking. And that moment, that simple, quiet morning, would become the first thread in a story that neither of them would forget. Stella stayed seated on the couch long after Marcus walked out the second time. She listened to the faint click of the closing door, the quiet hallway beyond it, and the way the apartment seemed to exhale once he was gone. It was strange how silence could take up more space than sound, as if the air itself had shifted. She wrapped her arms around herself and leaned back, letting her head fall against the cushion. The morning felt heavier than it should. There wasn't a single argument, no harsh words exchanged, no dramatic moments, just absence. That was what scared her. Absence had a way of whispering a truth your heart didn't want to hear. She reached for her own phone and glanced at the screen. No messages, no missed calls. Her life felt paused while his was somewhere else, somewhere she couldn't reach. Meanwhile, Marcus rushed toward the elevator in the hallway outside. His footsteps echoed sharply, too quick, too uneven. He wasn't late for work. He had left early, earlier than usual. But his mind wasn't on the meetings waiting for him, or the reports he still needed to review. His thoughts were swirling in a way he couldn't control. That call, that voice, that past he never fully closed the door on. He pressed the elevator button harder than necessary, jaw clenched, breath uneven. He didn't know why he reacted that way, why his heart had thudded in his chest as soon as he saw the caller ID. He hadn't spoken to her in years. He shouldn't have felt anything. He shouldn't have answered. He knew that. But he had. And now, the guilt twisted in his stomach. Inside the apartment, Stella stood from the couch and walked slowly to the kitchen. She poured herself a glass of water because she needed something steady to hold onto. She replayed the morning in her mind, the missing touch, the sudden change in his eyes, the way he stepped away with that phone pressed close to his ear. His tone had softened, she noticed. Not gentle, but familiar, like he had stepped into a part of himself she had never met. Her chest tightened. She didn't want to jump to conclusions. She wasn't the type to accuse or assume. But her heart was trained in a different kind of awareness. Black women learned to hear emotional shifts before they turned into storms. It was anti-wisdom, passed down with the same seriousness as recipes and life lessons. And this morning, it didn't feel right. She took a sip of water, then set the glass down. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from confusion. She whispered to herself, "What are you not telling me, Marcus?" Across town, Marcus finally stepped into the elevator. He leaned against the wall and let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for years. His mind kept replaying the moment the phone rang. He didn't want to go back to that version of himself, the young man who was unsure, emotional, searching. His life with Stella had been built on stability, warmth, partnership. She grounded him in a way he didn't even know he needed. But hearing that voice, it pulled at something old, something unresolved, something he thought he buried. He hated how quickly his heart reacted. He hated the confusion it stirred in his chest. He hated the guilt that followed him like a shadow. He rubbed his forehead, trying to push the thoughts away. "Get it together," he muttered under his breath. "Don't mess this up." But guilt didn't listen. Memory didn't listen. And the past, it never cared about timing. Back at the apartment, Stella wiped the counter slowly, not because it needed cleaning, but because she needed motion to quiet her thoughts. Her mind fought between logic and instinct. Logic said, "It's just a phone call. Don't overthink it." Instinct said, "People don't change their tone like that with just anyone." She closed her eyes briefly, feeling the sting of truth rising in her chest. She didn't know who the caller was. She didn't know what was said, but she knew this. Whatever that call was, it wasn't work. It wasn't family. It wasn't routine. It was personal, deeply personal. The kind of personal that reaches into old memories and shakes something loose. Marcus arrived in the parking garage and leaned against his car for a moment, trying to steady his breath. He felt torn between guilt and confusion, between the life he chose and the life his memory kept dragging him toward. He unlocked the car but didn't get in right away. Instead, he rested both hands on the roof of the vehicle and lowered his head. He didn't want to hurt Stella. He didn't even know if he wanted to revisit his past. But he couldn't deny the truth. The call did something to him. Inside the apartment, Stella sank onto a dining chair. She pressed her palms against her forehead and whispered a truth that rose too quickly to swallow down. It's wild how one ringtone can expose everything you didn't want to face. She wasn't talking about Marcus alone. She was talking about herself too, about the fear she had never admitted, the fear that Marcus still carried a part of his past he never fully shared. The fear that she had been loving a man who wasn't done with a chapter she didn't know existed. Her heart beat slowly but heavily, like it was bracing itself for something she couldn't see yet. And she wasn't wrong, because that call, that single ringtone in the softness of morning, had already set something in motion, something neither of them could undo, not with apologies, not with logic, not with love alone. The world they built together had shifted, just slightly, just enough to expose the beginning of a fracture, and Stella felt it in a way she couldn't ignore. Marcus didn't return home that evening at his usual time. Stella noticed immediately. She always did. His routine was predictable, not in a dull way, but in a comforting one. He usually called when he hit traffic, usually walked in the door by late afternoon, usually slipped off his shoes at the same spot and gave her a tired smile that told her his day had been too long. But tonight, the apartment stayed still, light fading through the blinds, her dinner untouched, music playing softly in the background, something she turned on to keep the silence from pressing too hard against her chest. She checked the time again, not because she doubted the clock, but because she couldn't understand how the hours had moved without him. She picked up her phone. Still nothing. No message. No call. Not even the usual running behind. She set the phone down carefully, as if placing it too roughly might break something else. Stella inhaled deeply and pressed her palms flat on the counter. She wasn't a woman who chased chaos. She wasn't the partner who jumped to conclusions or demanded explanations before understanding the situation. Her upbringing taught her emotional balance. Her mother always said, "If someone wants to be their baby, they show up. If they don't, they leave clues." And tonight was a clue. A painful one. Across the city, Marcus sat in his car outside an old park he hadn't visited since he was much younger. The lights were dim, the sky turning pale blue as the last bit of daylight slipped away. He didn't know why he drove there. Maybe because the call had shaken loose memories he didn't expect. Maybe because he needed space to think. Maybe because guilt felt too heavy to bring home. His phone lay in the passenger seat, screen lighting up every few minutes with notifications he ignored. Work emails, meeting reminders. Nothing from Stella. Not because she didn't care, but because she trusted him enough to believe he would come home when he said he would. That trust gnawed at him. He rested his forehead on the steering wheel, feeling the weight of everything he wasn't saying, everything he didn't know how to say. He shouldn't have answered that call. He shouldn't have let the past pull him sideways. He shouldn't have walked out the door without grounding himself in what he had with Stella. But confusion was a quiet enemy. It didn't yell. It whispered. And he had listened. Back at the apartment, Stella sat on the couch, her fingers tracing the seam of a cushion as she replayed the morning. The missing touch, the softened voice, the way he stepped away like he was protecting something fragile, but not her. A knot tightened in her stomach. She didn't want to fall apart over assumptions, but she couldn't deny what her spirit understood long before her mind accepted it. She whispered into the empty room. Something changed today. Her voice didn't shake. Her eyes didn't fill. But her heart, her beautiful, loyal heart, dimmed just a little. She stood from the couch and moved to the bedroom. She began gathering her things, not out of anger, not out of punishment, not even out of heartbreak alone, but out of dignity. She folded her clothes quietly, placing each piece into a small overnight bag she kept for weekend visits to family. She touched the fabric gently, remembering moments shared with Marcus, laughter on lazy mornings, conversations on the balcony, soft words exchanged under warm blankets. But all of it felt different now. Not gone. Not meaningless. Just changed. Love didn't disappear in a single moment, but trust could crack instantly. She zipped the bag and looked around the room one last time. The framed picture of them on the dresser. The flowers she bought last week still alive on the nightstand. The space where he had held her countless nights. She closed her eyes and exhaled a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Sometimes leaving wasn't about giving up. Sometimes leaving was about respecting yourself enough to step away when someone else steps back. She walked to the front door, set her keys on the small table beside it, and whispered, "I hope you find whatever you're looking for." Then she left. Quietly, gracefully, without slamming doors or making scenes. She didn't know where she was going, maybe to her mother's for the night, maybe to take a drive and breathe, but she knew she couldn't stay in a space where she felt like an afterthought. She deserved presence. She deserved intention. She deserved more than uncertainty. Hours later, Marcus drove back toward the apartment, guilt twisting every step of the way. He rehearsed explanations in his mind, trying to make sense of choices he didn't fully understand himself. But when he opened the door, the stillness inside felt different. Too empty, too echoing. His eyes landed on the keys she left on the table. A cold wave washed over him. He called her name softly, almost afraid to hear nothing in response. And nothing came. He stepped farther inside, noticing the missing bag from the closet, the untouched dinner on the counter, the silence that felt heavier than any argument they had ever had. He sank onto the couch, head in his hands. He didn't lose Stella because of the past. He lost her because, for a moment, he let someone, pull him away from the present he should have protected. Love isn't always stolen. Sometimes it's returned to sender, when someone forgets how to hold it. And in that quiet apartment in Atlanta, Marcus realized the weight of his actions. This wasn't a bad day. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was the beginning of consequences he never expected. Stella didn't go far that night. She drove with no destination in mind, letting the Atlanta streets guide her through the soft glow of passing headlights. The rain had stopped, leaving the asphalt shining beneath the city lights. Her heart felt tender, but not shattered, just sore in the way a muscle aches after being strained for too long. She found herself in a familiar neighborhood, not because she planned it, but because comfort often draws you home even when you don't realize where you're going. She parked near a row of small shops where she used to spend time before she met Marcus, a place full of easy laughter, familiar scents, and conversations that healed without trying. Stella stepped out of the car and took in the warmth of the night. Someone had music playing from a portable speaker, soft R&B, the kind that wrapped around your spirit instead of demanding your attention. The air carried the smell of fried fish and seasoned wings from a nearby takeout spot, mixing with the earthy sweetness of rain-soaked concrete. She didn't need anyone to say her name. She didn't need explanations or judgments. She just needed space, space that felt like her. She walked slowly down the sidewalk, letting the sounds of small talk drift around her. Older women on folding chairs laughed loudly about something one of them said. A group of men argued playfully about a basketball game. Someone's child skipped past with a juice pouch in hand, singing off-key but full of joy. This was the Atlanta she grew up in. The Atlanta that raised her. The Atlanta that loved her without conditions. Stella sat on a small bench outside one of the shops. The air was still warm, but a gentle breeze brushed against her skin, grounding her. For a long moment, she simply breathed. It was the kind of breath you take when you finally allow yourself to feel everything, not to break, but to release. Her mind traveled through the last 20 to 4 hours. Marcus stepping away, his softened voice, the silence in the apartment, her leaving without drama because the truth was already loud enough. She didn't regret walking out, not because she didn't love him, but because love should never require you to shrink yourself to fit into someone else's confusion. She wrapped her arms around herself and whispered, "I'll be okay. I always am." It wasn't a denial of her pain. It was a reminder of her strength. Growing up in a community full of humor, music, faith, and resilience taught her that healing wasn't a single moment. It was a rhythm, a slow return to yourself. As she sat there, soaking in the familiar sounds around her, she felt the first small shift inside her chest. Not joy, not closure, just clarity. She had been giving so much of herself to Marcus, her stability, her warmth, her patience, that she forgot to check if he was meeting her halfway. Tonight reminded her that she still had herself, and that was a foundation no heartbreak could remove. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. No messages, no missed calls. Part of her expected that. Another part hoped for more. But healing doesn't start with someone else's apology. It starts with your own truth. She stood, stretched her shoulders, and started walking back through the neighborhood. People nodded, smiled, small gestures of belonging. No one asked where she had been or why she looked tired. That was the beauty of her community. Love wasn't loud. It was consistent. By the time Stella reached her car again, she felt lighter. She wasn't healed, not yet, but the ground beneath her feet felt steady enough to carry her. When she finally drove home, not to Marcus's apartment, but to her own small place she kept for herself, she unlocked the door, stepped in, and exhaled into the darkness. She turned on a lamp, let the soft light fill the room, and whispered, "This is where I start again." She placed her small overnight bag by the chair, washed her face, tied her hair, and slid into bed. Her body felt heavy, but her heart felt honest. Tomorrow would come, and she would rise again, not loudly, not all at once, but in the quiet, intentional way only a woman who knows her worth can. Her healing had begun, not because Marcus pushed her away, but because she chose to return to herself. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat on the couch long after discovering Stella's keys on the table, staring at the empty space where she should have been, the space he took for granted until it swallowed him whole. The silence in the apartment pressed against him, heavier than anything he'd felt in years. He wasn't used to this kind of quiet. Stella filled rooms without trying, not with noise, but with warmth, with presence, with something that made the air feel softer. Now the apartment felt like a hotel room, clean, structured, beautiful, and completely lifeless. Marcus leaned back and rubbed the back of his neck. His eyes were tired, but his mind refused to rest. He replayed the morning, the phone call, the moment he walked past her without a touch, the shift in her eyes he ignored. He hadn't meant to hurt her. He hadn't meant to walk away from everything they built. He just didn't know how to confront the confusion inside him. He told himself he would explain when he got home. He told himself she would be there. He told himself this was temporary. But Stella wasn't waiting in heartbreak. She wasn't curled on the couch hoping he'd return with apologies. She was gone, not lost, but gone in a way that forced him to face himself. His chest tightened. He stood and walked into the bedroom. The absence was louder there. Her pillow still carried the faint scent of her hair. Her throw blanket was folded neatly, not because she left in a rush, but because she chose to leave with dignity. That was the part that twisted him the most. Stella didn't leave in anger. She didn't leave in accusation. She left with quiet self-respect, which meant she had been hurting long before he realized. Marcus sat on the bed and lowered his head into his hands. He whispered into the empty room, "What did I do?" But the answer wasn't complicated. He knew exactly where he went wrong. He let the past disrupt his present. He allowed a single call to shake his foundation. He forgot what Stella meant to him until the moment she walked away. The following morning, he forced himself into his routine. Shower, clothes, coffee, keys. But the motions felt wrong, mechanical instead of intentional. He walked into his corporate office building, greeted by polished floors, spotless glass, and a chill in the air that used to make him feel focused. Today it made him feel alone. Meetings came and went. People spoke to him, but he didn't hear them. Reports were placed on his desk, but the numbers didn't register. His mind was replaying Stella leaving, not as a dramatic event, not as an argument, but as a quiet truth. The first sign of regret wasn't guilt. It was emptiness. He ate lunch at his desk, staring at the city skyline. Atlanta stretched far and wide, full of life and noise, yet he had never felt more isolated. His phone buzzed once. He grabbed it quickly, too quickly, hoping it was her. It wasn't. Just another reminder from a calendar he no longer cared about. He dropped the phone on the desk, frustration rising in his chest. He didn't want to be the kind of man who realized someone's value only when they were gone. But that's exactly who he became without noticing. Later in the afternoon, he stepped into a conference room for a presentation. As the lights dimmed and the screen lit up, a sinking feeling washed over him. Stella had helped him rehearse for these kinds of meetings, not because she needed to, but because she loved seeing him succeed. She often sat across from him, legs tucked beneath her on the couch, giving feedback, smiling when he got through difficult parts. Her encouragement had been a quiet force in his life, one he mistook for stability instead of love. Now, standing in a room full of well-dressed colleagues, he felt the hollowness of their applause. None of them cared about the man behind the job. They only cared about the results. Stella cared about him. He didn't realize how rare that was until the void she left swallowed every space he walked into. After the meeting, he returned to his office and closed the door. As soon as the latch clicked, his shoulders sagged. He whispered, barely audible, "I messed up." His regret wasn't a sudden crash. It was a slow tightening in his chest, a steady awareness spreading through his body. By the time the workday ended, Marcus wasn't thinking about the call anymore. He wasn't thinking about nostalgia or unresolved memories. He was thinking about Stella's absence. He walked into the apartment that night, and the lights seemed harsher, the air colder. Her absence had shape now, a real, physical weight that clung to him. He opened the fridge, saw the dinner she had made the night she left still sitting untouched in a container, and his throat tightened. She used to wait for him. Now he was the one waiting, for a chance to make things right. Some men never understand the value of stability until they lose the one person who brought it into their lives. And regret. Regret doesn't come as a single moment of truth. It comes as a slow, steady heaviness that refuses to leave. Marcus wasn't just facing consequences. He was living inside them. And for the first time he realized something devastating. Stella didn't leave to teach him a lesson. She left because she refused to be an option in someone else's confusion. And that kind of strength? It didn't wait for anyone. Marcus waited until the following evening to reach out. Not because he wanted to give Stella space, though he told himself that was the reason, but because he wasn't ready to face the version of himself he had become in the past 24 hours. He stared at his phone for nearly an hour, crafting and deleting messages. "Can we talk? Are you okay? Please come home." None of them felt right. None of them felt enough. He wasn't used to being the one who didn't know what to say. Stella had always been the communicator, the emotional guide, the one who could take a tangled feeling and turn it into something clear. But now he was alone with thoughts he didn't understand and guilt he didn't know how to carry. Finally, he typed a simple message. "Stella, I'm sorry. Can we talk?" He stared at the screen for a long moment before hitting send. The small whoosh sound sent a jolt of anxiety through his chest. He waited. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. 20. Nothing. He tried calling. The phone rang twice before going to voicemail. Her voicemail message felt like a reminder of the softness he had once taken for granted. He hung up before the tone. The silence on her end wasn't cruel. It wasn't punishment. It was clarity. Stella wasn't sitting by her phone waiting for him to realize what he lost. She wasn't holding her breath, hoping he would come running back with apologies. She wasn't in the emotional place he left her in. She was moving forward, slowly, quietly, intentionally. Across town, Stella sat on her bed with her knees pulled close to her chest. Her phone buzzed once on the nightstand. She saw Marcus's name and froze. Not in longing, not in fear, in acceptance. She didn't rush to pick it up. She didn't rehearse what she might say. She simply stared at the screen, feeling the gentle ache of a wound that had stopped bleeding. She wasn't healed, not fully, but she was no longer at the place where she needed him to choose her. The time she spent away had grounded her. The familiar music, the community, the laughter she overheard from people who didn't even know she was hurting. It all reminded her that she existed outside of Marcus, that her worth didn't depend on how tightly he held on. She reached for the phone, looked at his message, and exhaled softly. "Can we talk?" Once, she would have answered immediately. Once, she would have believed that talking could fix anything. But this wasn't the same story anymore. The pain didn't make her bitter. It made her aware. With a steady breath, she placed the phone face down and stood from the bed. She didn't need to respond right now. She didn't owe immediate access to someone who didn't value her consistency until it vanished. Stella walked to the kitchen and poured herself a cup of tea. She moved deliberately, not rushed, not shaken. Her actions had a calmness that came from choosing herself. The kettle whistled softly. She poured the hot water, watching the steam rise, watching the tea bag darken the water slowly. Healing didn't come all at once. It came in small rituals that reminded her she could find peace again. She held the warm mug between her hands, feeling something settle inside her. Not closure, not certainty, but strength. Marcus paced the apartment, unable to sit still. His thoughts ricocheted between guilt and desperation. He replayed the moment he walked away. He replayed her leaving. He replayed every silent clue he ignored. The hardest part wasn't that Stella hadn't responded. The hardest part was realizing she wasn't where he left her emotionally. He had expected her to be waiting. Not out of arrogance, out of habit. Stella had always been there, supporting him, grounding him, softening the edges of his corporate life. She never demanded attention. She simply offered love in the small, intentional ways that made life feel livable. Marcus never imagined a version of the world where Stella chose herself over him. But that was the world he lived in now. He sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. The weight in his chest felt heavier with every second. He whispered, "Please don't give up on us." But Stella hadn't given up. She had grown. Later that night, Stella finally picked up her phone again. She saw Marcus's message still sitting there, unread. She opened it and read the words slowly. "Stella, I'm sorry. Can we talk?" Her eyes softened, not with tears, but with understanding. She knew Marcus wasn't trying to manipulate her or minimize what happened. He was a man who finally realized what he jeopardized. But realization wasn't enough. Healing required effort, consistency, accountability. She set the phone down without responding, not out of spite, but because she needed to keep choosing herself for a little longer. Her heart whispered something she wasn't ready to say out loud. "He's trying to return to a place I no longer live." And that truth settled over her like quiet wisdom. Marcus lay awake deep into the night. The apartment felt colder than the night before, the air heavier. He checked his phone repeatedly, hoping for a message. Nothing came. You can't come back to someone who had to learn to live without you. Because while you were standing still, they were rebuilding the world you broke. For Marcus, this wasn't the end of the story. But it was the beginning of understanding that love isn't guaranteed just because you finally want it back. Timing had shifted, and Stella was no longer waiting. Marcus woke earlier than usual the next morning, long before the sun had risen above the Atlanta skyline. The apartment felt colder, heavier, as though the air itself was holding him accountable. He sat at the edge of the bed, alone, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped tightly. Sleep hadn't touched him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Stella walking out the door, not in anger, but in a quiet certainty that cut deeper than shouting ever could. Her silence haunted him more than any confrontation would have. He stood and walked to the bathroom sink, splashing cold water on his face. He looked at himself in the mirror, not the successful CEO, not the well-composed man he presented to the world, but the version of himself he tried to bury. The version who ran. He ran from discomfort. He ran from emotional responsibility. He ran from vulnerability. And when the past called him, literally, he ran from stability without even realizing his feet were moving. Marcus stared at his reflection, seeing the truth he had ignored for years. He had always mistaken familiarity for fate. Nostalgia had a way of tricking him. Old memories felt safe because they didn't require growth. Past relationships felt unfinished because he never learned how to close doors properly. Every time he faced a major emotional moment, he reached backward instead of inward. Stella had filled the quiet spaces of his life with warmth he didn't know he needed. She gave him emotional grounding he had never experienced, but he had taken that steadiness for granted, assuming it would always be there. He touched the edge of the sink, gripping it until his knuckles whitened. "Why do I do this?" he whispered. The question wasn't directed at Stella. It wasn't about the phone call anymore. It was about his patterns. He flashed back to memories he rarely allowed himself to revisit, moments when he walked away from good things because the past tugged at him, moments when he let history distract him from what was present and real. Some men confuse history with destiny. They believe the past still holds a claim on them, simply because it existed first. They chase old feelings hoping they'll become new answers, never realizing that stability isn't boring. It's a blessing that requires intention. Marcus closed his eyes, letting that reality wash over him like cold water. Stella had offered him a love rooted in partnership, consistency, and emotional maturity. He didn't lose her because he stopped loving her. He lost her because he failed to protect the space where their love lived. And he knew that now. He left the bathroom and walked into the living room, staring at the couch where she used to curl up while waiting for him to come home. He ran a hand over the armrest, remembering the nights she sat there talking about her dreams, her future, her hopes for their life together. He realized he had listened, but he hadn't heard her. He remembered how she used to place her hand on his chest when he was stressed, grounding him without saying a word. How she cooked meals that reminded him love could be simple. How she challenged him to be emotionally open, even when it scared him. She wasn't asking for perfection. She was asking for presence. And he had given her distance instead. Marcus walked slowly to the balcony, sliding the door open. The cold morning air brushed his face as he stepped outside. The city stretched below him, unaware of the emotional storm rolling inside his chest. He leaned on the railing and closed his eyes. The truth was heavy but clear. He didn't lose Stella because she stopped loving him. He lost her because she started loving herself more than she feared losing him. And that was a consequence he earned. In that moment, Marcus felt the cost of taking love for granted. Not in a dramatic explosion, not in a single moment of realization, but in the slow tightening of regret that now lived with him like a shadow. He whispered into the morning air, "I should have been better." Not for her alone, for himself. He had built an entire life around professional discipline, yet avoided emotional discipline like it was a burden instead of a responsibility. He chased memories because they demanded nothing, while the present asked him to grow. Stella had been willing to grow with him, but he hadn't shown up. As the sun began to rise over Atlanta, casting soft gold across the balcony, Marcus understood something deeply. Love isn't just about how you feel in the bright moments. It's about how you honor it in the quiet ones. And he had failed that test. Now, for the first time, he wasn't running. He wasn't hiding behind excuses. He wasn't blaming timing or circumstances. He was standing still, forced to face the man he had allowed himself to become. And facing yourself is the hardest part of losing someone you never thought would walk away. Stella woke up earlier than usual, sunlight spilling across her room in soft ribbons. Her place was smaller than the apartment she shared with Marcus, but something about it felt lighter, like the air itself welcomed her home. She stretched slowly, feeling a calm she hadn't felt in months. It wasn't happiness exactly, but peace. the kind that settles in your chest after you finally choose yourself. After a long shower, she moisturized her skin, tied her hair neatly, and dressed in clothes that made her feel strong in her own body. She moved through her morning with intention, made breakfast, played soft music, organized her schedule. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't moving around someone else's routines. She was moving in her own rhythm. She checked her bank app, not out of worry but strategy. Stella had always been responsible with her finances. Moving into her own place meant adjusting, budgeting, and planning. But she wasn't intimidated by it. She felt empowered. Growing up, she learned to stretch dollars without stretching dignity. Those skills never left her. She sat at her small dining table, laptop open, notes spread around her. She had goals, ones she put aside while trying to maintain her relationship with Marcus. Now she poured herself back into them. She brainstormed new career moves. She researched opportunities that aligned with her passions. She watched motivational videos, took notes, set intentions. Every step she took reminded her that healing wasn't just emotional. It could be financial, spiritual, and mental. Her glow didn't come from revenge. It came from alignment. Her home filled with the scent of a candle she lit, warm vanilla, soothing and soft, a scent she chose specifically because it made her feel grounded. She moved with purpose, not pressure. And the more she fell into this new routine, the more she recognized something she had forgotten. She was capable of building a life she loved, with or without Marcus. Meanwhile, Marcus sat in his office, staring at a spreadsheet he couldn't focus on. The numbers blurred, lines shifting. His chest felt tight. He rubbed his temples, trying to push through the fog of regret clouding his mind. He had tried reaching out to Stella again earlier that morning, but she hadn't responded. Not even a read receipt. It stung, but he understood why. He reached for his phone again, tempted to call her one more time, but he put it back down. A part of him knew Stella didn't need him right now. Another part worried she didn't want him anymore. He stood and walked to the window, looking down at the city. So much movement, so much life. Yet he felt stuck, trapped in the consequences of choices he made without realizing their weight. He remembered the version of Stella he took for granted, warm, consistent, loving. But he had never seen the version that was emerging now, the Stella who chose herself. And he wasn't prepared for how powerful she looked in independence. Later that week, Marcus left work early, unable to concentrate. He took a quiet drive through the city, windows cracked open, letting the cool air hit his face. He didn't know where he was going. He just needed to move, to think. That's when he saw her, not up close, not in conversation, but from across a parking lot outside a small cafe she loved. Stella walked out holding a drink in one hand, her posture straight, her steps light. The sun hit her skin in a way that made her look almost luminous, not because of makeup or clothes, but because of peace. She glowed in a way he hadn't seen in a long time. Her hair was styled neatly, her outfit simple but elegant. She looked confident, centered, rooted in herself. Marcus froze. His breath caught in his throat as he watched her laugh softly at something on her phone. A genuine laugh, unforced, free from tension. He'd been the source of that laugh once. Now he wasn't even part of the moment. A warmth spread through his chest, not jealousy, but longing mixed with grief. Stella walked to her car, keys in hand. Before she opened the door, she paused and lifted her face to the sun, eyes closed, letting the warmth hit her. That small gesture, simple and quiet, struck Marcus deeply. She looked happy, not pretending, not forcing it, not waiting for anyone. She looked like a woman who remembered her worth and was rediscovering joy. Marcus felt something shift inside him, something painful and honest. She didn't need him to be whole. He stepped back slightly, not wanting her to see him. He wasn't ready to face her. More importantly, he wasn't sure she wanted him to. Seeing her this way made him realize the gap between them wasn't just emotional, it was growth. Stella wasn't stuck in the moment she left. She was evolving, and he was still standing in the rubble of his choices. Stella got into her car and drove away, music likely playing softly the way she loved. Marcus remained in place long after she was gone, trying to understand the ache in his chest. It wasn't just regret, it was recognition. He had expected her to hurt. He expected her to linger in sadness while he sorted his life. But she had moved forward in ways he didn't anticipate, ways he wasn't ready for. When you take someone for granted, you imagine they'll be waiting where you left them. But people grow in the absence of neglect. They bloom in the space created by disappointment. And sometimes, the strongest version of them appears right after you realize you needed them the most. Marcus sat back in his car, hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel. He whispered into the quiet cabin, "I didn't know she could glow like that without me, but she could." And that glow wasn't meant to punish him. It was meant to free her. Marcus didn't go home right away after seeing Stella outside the cafe. His body felt rooted to the ground long after she pulled out of the parking lot. The sight of her, glowing, peaceful, centered, had struck something he wasn't prepared to feel. He had expected sadness when he saw her. He had expected longing. He even expected guilt. But he didn't expect fear, a deep, unsettling fear that whispered quietly inside him, "She's learning how to live without you, and she's getting good at it." He sat in his car, staring through the windshield at nothing in particular. His hands rested on the steering wheel, unmoving, his breath uneven as reality settled over him like a slow tide. He whispered into the stillness, "She looked happy." Saying it out loud made the truth sharper. He started the engine but didn't drive home. Instead, he drove aimlessly through Atlanta, passing familiar streets that suddenly felt unfamiliar without Stella sitting in the passenger seat. He remembered how she used to talk during drives, sometimes about her day, sometimes about her dreams, sometimes about the small things she noticed that brought her joy. Her voice used to fill the car with life. Now the silence felt suffocating. He rolled down the window, hoping the cool air would ease the ache in his chest. It didn't. The ache wasn't physical. It was emotional, a deep tightening of regret that had been growing slowly but now surged uncontrollably. Marcus finally parked in a quiet area overlooking a small lake. He needed space. He needed truth. He needed to face the part of himself he kept avoiding. He stepped out of the car and walked to the water's edge. The reflection of city lights shimmered across the surface, rippling gently with the wind. It was beautiful, but it didn't calm him. If anything, it made him feel smaller. He shoved his hands into his pockets, feeling the weight of everything he had ignored. He thought about Stella's expression in the parking lot, soft, peaceful, content, not searching for him, not thinking about him, just living. That was the twist he didn't expect. He thought losing her would break her. Instead, losing him set her free. Marcus sank onto a nearby bench, elbows resting on his knees, head lowered. His breath grew uneven as emotion pulled at him. Frustration, sorrow, guilt, longing, all woven together inside his chest. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel all of it. A memory surfaced, one he hadn't thought about in years. A moment from early in their relationship when Stella told him, "All I ask is honesty, not perfection, just honesty." He had promised her he would always be open. But when the past called him, he hid. He stepped away instead of stepping forward. He let confusion interrupt a love that had always been stable, and now stability lived somewhere he could no longer reach. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out quickly, hoping, desperately, that it was Stella. It wasn't. Just another reminder from work. He sank deeper into the bench, chest tightening. He whispered, voice breaking, "I did this." Not the call, not the past. Him. He had allowed uncertainty to guide his choices. He had allowed nostalgia to distract him. He had allowed fear to silence honesty he owed the woman who loved him fully. Regret isn't the moment you realize you messed up. Regret is the moment you finally stop blaming circumstances and start seeing your own reflection clearly. Marcus sat there for a long time, feeling the truth settle heavily in his bones. He didn't lose Stella because she was weak. He lost her because she was strong enough to walk away. And the emotional twist he now faced was this. Stella no longer needed him to complete her story. She had become her own turning point. Marcus leaned back, staring at the sky. A tear escaped before he could wipe it away, not from sadness alone, but from understanding. He finally saw the pattern he had ignored his whole life. When things felt too real, too vulnerable, he ran toward history because it felt safe. He confused comfort with love. He mistook old memories for answers. He wanted certainty without giving transparency. The cost was clear now, painfully clear. He whispered again, "I should have chosen her. I should have stayed present." His voice caught. He pressed a hand to his chest, the weight of everything hitting him fully for the first time. Not the loneliness, not the silence, the accountability. Because accountability wasn't about accepting blame. It was about recognizing the role you played in your own heartbreak. Accountability hits hardest when there's no one left to blame, when the mirror becomes the only person you can confront. And when the person you hurt is finally discovering a life where your absence doesn't break them anymore. Marcus stayed by the water long into the night, feeling the truth settle deeper and deeper. Stella wasn't waiting. Stella wasn't hurting the way she once was. Stella wasn't in the place he left her. And if he ever wanted a chance at redemption, he would have to become a man worth returning to. Atlanta had settled into a warm Saturday afternoon, the kind where families filled sidewalks, food trucks lined crowded streets, and the air carried the blended sense of grilled food, buttered corn, and hot pavement. Stella didn't plan to go out that day. She almost stayed home, but something in her told her she needed air. Not escape, release. She parked near a small neighborhood street festival she had visited years ago. The moment she stepped out of her car, she felt the music vibrating faintly through the ground. Children ran between booths. Vendors called out about lemonade, jewelry, and handmade candles. A band performed near the end of the street, their sound drifting through the festival like a heartbeat. Stella walked slowly, taking her time. She felt lighter, more centered, still healing, but stronger than she'd been in months. She browsed items at a vendor's table, lifting a bracelet that caught her eye, gold-toned, simple, elegant. She smiled at it softly. Her smile had returned in a way she hadn't expected. She didn't notice the tall figure stepping into the street behind her, but Marcus saw her instantly. He had come to the festival out of habit, something he used to do with coworkers on weekends just to get out of corporate environments. But he wasn't here for relaxation. He was here because silence at home had started suffocating him. He turned the corner, expecting crowds and music. Instead, he found Stella. His breath disappeared. Stella stood near a vendor table, sunlight catching in her hair, posture relaxed, expression peaceful. The sight hit him so hard he instinctively slowed his steps. She looked different, not unfamiliar, just elevated, grounded, glowing with a quiet strength he didn't recognize before. And she wasn't looking for him. That made the moment pierce deeper. Marcus swallowed hard, fingers curling slightly at his sides. Something inside him pulled forward, as if his body moved before his mind decided anything. He stepped forward. Stella felt a presence behind her, a shift in the air, a familiar energy she hadn't encountered since the day she left Marcus's apartment. She didn't turn around immediately. She didn't need to. Some connections leave imprints. When she finally turned, her gaze met his. Time didn't freeze. It tightened. The crowd noise softened. The festival colors dimmed slightly around the edges. For a second, there were only two people in the street, Stella and Marcus, locked in a moment neither expected. Marcus's breath caught again. Stella. Her name slipped from him without thought, soft, almost reverent, the way someone says a word they aren't sure they're allowed to speak anymore. Stella's posture remained steady. She didn't flinch. Her expression stayed calm, eyes steady, breath controlled. But beneath the surface something stirred. Not longing, not anger. History. Unresolved history. She nodded once. Marcus. Just his name. Nothing more. But even the sound of her voice, leveled, composed, pierced something inside him. He stepped closer, leaving a respectful distance between them. I didn't expect to see you here. Stella shrugged lightly. Neither did I. The space between them held a tension that wasn't loud or dramatic. It was subtle, quiet, like a held breath on the verge of release. Not hostile, just charged. Marcus studied her face, the clarity in her eyes, the softness in her expression, the new steadiness in her presence. He felt both admiration and devastation rising inside him. She looked strong. She looked healed. She looked like someone who had finally stepped into the version of herself she'd been growing toward for years. And he wasn't part of that version. Stella, I've been wanting to talk to you, he said, voice low but earnest. Her jaw tightened just slightly, a tiny shift only someone who truly knew her would see. I figured that, she replied gently. I saw your message, she continued. I just wasn't ready. He nodded, swallowing hard. I understand. She looked at him, really looked, and the unspoken truth passed silently between them. He wasn't the center of her world anymore. But that didn't erase what they once had. A group of children ran past them, laughter echoing through the street. The moment broke just slightly, grounding them back into the festival. Stella took a breath, eyes shifting toward the jewelry table. I didn't expect you to be out today. Couldn't stay home, he admitted. It felt empty. Her gaze lowered for a moment, catching something she didn't want to linger on. Not guilt, not sympathy. Recognition. She understood that kind of emptiness once. She didn't live in it anymore. She lifted her eyes back to him. "How have you been?" He exhaled shakily. "Trying to be honest with myself." For the first time, the words hit her harder than she expected, not because she doubted him, but because she remembered how long she waited for him to reach this point, and he reached it in her absence. The tension between them shifted, from sharp to tender, from painful to human. A quiet ache lingered in the air, born from everything said and unsaid. Stella nodded slowly. "That's a good start, Marcus." The way she said it, steady, calm, compassionate, made his chest tighten. He had imagined this moment differently, her angry, her emotional, her overwhelmed, but she stood here grounded, composed, no longer tethered to his confusion. It was the first time Marcus truly understood how much she had grown, and how far behind he was. Before either of them could speak again, a gust of wind swept through the street, lifting Stella's hair slightly, carrying the scent of food and festival laughter with it. Marcus swallowed hard. "Can we talk? Really talk?" Stella took a slow breath. Not yes, not no, just breath. Because the decision wasn't simple, not anymore. And that was the moment everything shifted. The wind carried the sound of the street festival, laughter, music, chatter, but around Stella and Marcus everything felt insulated. The world moved on, but they stood suspended in the moment, held in place by a history neither of them had fully unpacked. Stella folded her arms loosely, not defensively, but to steady herself. She could feel her heartbeat, slow and controlled, matching the new version of herself she had grown into. Marcus stood across from her, hands slipping into his pockets as if he didn't know what to do with them. His eyes stayed on her with a mixture of regret and longing. "Marcus," she said quietly, her voice gentle but firm, "what exactly do you want to talk about?" He swallowed, the tension catching in his throat. "About us," he said, voice low. "About what happened." Stella looked at him steadily, unblinking. Her calm wasn't cold, it was clarity. "What happened was simple," she said softly. "You stepped away, and when you did, I had to step back into myself." Marcus exhaled, closing his eyes briefly. She could see the weight of her words hit him, see the regret settle deeper into his posture. "I know I hurt you," he said. "I know I messed things up." Stella didn't interrupt. She let the silence do the work. He continued, "When the call came, I acted on confusion. I reacted to something that didn't deserve the reaction I gave. I didn't think. I didn't stop to consider you, or us." Her eyebrows lowered slightly, not in anger, but in reflection. "That's the part I keep replaying," she said. "Not the call, but how easily you drifted away from me." Marcus nodded slowly, jaw tight. "I know. And I'm not making excuses, I didn't understand myself then. I kept thinking I was over everything from my past, but when the call came, it exposed something I hadn't dealt with." Stella shifted her weight. The festival lights flickered softly on her face, highlighting the emotion she was trying to keep contained. "You don't owe me every detail of your past," she said. "But I needed you present in the life we were building. That morning, you weren't there. You weren't with me." She paused, then added, "You left before you physically walked out." Her words landed firmly, not accusatory, just honest. Marcus took a slow breath. "You're right." There was no defense in his tone, no argument, just truth. "I didn't appreciate what I had," he said quietly. "I thought we had time. I thought you would always be there." Stella looked away for a moment, eyes softening. "That's the problem, Marcus. You thought I'd stay no matter what, but love doesn't work that way. I can't be the one holding everything together while you're halfway somewhere else." The honesty cut through the space between them. Marcus looked at her with a pain that wasn't dramatic, just deeply human. "I miss you," he said, barely above a whisper. Stella didn't smile. She didn't soften. She simply let the words sit in the air without picking them up. "I know," she replied gently, "but missing me and choosing me aren't the same thing." Marcus lowered his gaze. He hated that she was right. He hated even more that she had to learn that difference because of him. "I thought reaching out, trying to talk, would help," he murmured. "I didn't know you were this far ahead emotionally." Stella's voice stayed calm. "I had to be. I couldn't stay in the place where I was hurting." Marcus nodded. His shoulders dropped slightly, as though the truth pressed down on him. "Do you think we could ever—" His voice trailed, unsure whether he had the right to finish the question. Stella met his eyes directly, steady, warm, but firm. "I don't know," she said. "I'm not saying no, but I'm not ready to say yes, because going back isn't the same as moving forward." Marcus's breath caught. Her clarity was beautiful and devastating. They stood there, surrounded by the sounds of life happening around them, neither reaching out, neither stepping away. The tension wasn't hostile. It wasn't explosive. It was tender, raw, human. "Marcus," she said softly, "I cared for you deeply. I still do. But I can't be the only one willing to show up." He nodded. He had heard the truth many times in his life, but never like this. "I'm trying now," he whispered. Stella's gaze didn't waver. "Trying isn't enough, not if it only starts after I'm gone." A quiet ache passed between them, not anger, not resentment. Understanding. Stella's strength wasn't meant to punish him. It was the result of everything she survived, loving him. Marcus's voice trembled as he spoke again. "Do you think there's still something between us?" Her expression softened, just slightly. "There's history," she said. "There's care, there's truth." Then her voice steadied. "But there's also hurt. And before anything can move forward, that has to be acknowledged fully." He nodded slowly, absorbing every word. "I want to fix this," he said. "You can't fix what you don't face," she replied gently. Marcus's chest tightened. She wasn't shutting him out. She was inviting honesty, real honesty, the kind he was never good at giving. A gust of wind moved through the street, snapping a banner overhead and sending the faint scent of food through the air. The world resumed around them. But between Stella and Marcus, the moment remained suspended, a delicate intersection of past and possibility. She took a small breath and spoke quietly. "This isn't goodbye, but it's not going back either." Her words were steady, clear, and true. Marcus swallowed thickly, his voice barely holding together. "Thank you for talking to me." Stella nodded. "Thank you for listening." And for the first time since their separation, they stood not as a broken couple, but as two people confronting the truth of who they were and who they might become. Stella and Marcus stood beneath a string of overhead festival lights as the evening settled into a warm amber glow. The street had grown busier, people brushing past them carrying plates of food, laughing loudly, calling out to one another, life moving in every direction except theirs. Their world felt still. Stella tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, her expression calm yet thoughtful. Marcus shifted his weight, hands still in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched, as if bracing for whatever she might say next. The confrontation they just had lingered in the air, not sharp, not explosive, but tender and honest in a way that left both of them quieter than before. Marcus spoke first. "Stella, do you want me to leave you alone?" His voice was soft, steady, but heavy with uncertainty. Not fear of rejection, but fear of losing the chance to grow beside her. Stella looked at him for a long moment before answering. "I don't want you to disappear," she said, "but I don't want to go back to the version of us that broke me." Marcus nodded slowly, absorbing that truth. She wasn't pushing him away, but she wasn't pulling him close either. She was protecting herself, and he felt the weight of that responsibility. He took a breath. "I don't blame you." Stella's gaze softened. "This isn't about blame. It's about patterns, about what we repeat if we're not careful." Marcus lowered his eyes. Patterns. The very thing he had only recently begun confronting in himself. "Do you think we're meant to try again?" he asked quietly. Stella didn't rush. She let the question sit between them, resting on top of their shared past, their unspoken pain, their lingering connection. The pause wasn't hesitation, it was evaluation, a thoughtful weighing of her heart, her healing, and what she wanted her future to look like. Finally, she spoke. "I think we could try again someday," she said slowly, "but only if both of us become new versions of ourselves." Marcus lifted his eyes to hers, listening intently. "I'm working on it," he said. It wasn't a promise. It was a confession. Stella nodded. "I can see that." A gentle breeze moved through the street, lifting the ends of her hair. Marcus looked at her with a heaviness that wasn't desperation, just truth. "I'm afraid," he admitted. "Afraid you'll heal to a place where you won't want me anymore." Stella breathed in deeply, compassion touching her features. "Marcus," she said softly, "healing doesn't erase history. It just gives me the strength to choose differently." His chest tightened. "Differently," From me, differently from the version of you who ran, she clarified. Not from the version I hope you can become. The distinction hit him deeply. She wasn't shutting the door. She wasn't flinging it open either. She was giving it a hinge. A chance, but only if earned. Marcus stepped a little closer, still careful not to cross the emotional line she held steady. What do you need from me right now? He asked. Stella looked at him with a steadiness that made his breath catch. Consistency, she said. Honesty, effort without expectation, and time, real time, for both of us to grow. Her list wasn't long, but it was weighty. Each word carried the weight of every moment she had spent giving more love than she received. Marcus nodded, emotion thickening his voice. I can do that, but not for me. She added gently, do it for yourself first, otherwise it won't last. He closed his eyes briefly, because she was right. Again, when he opened them, Stella was still watching him, expression open but firm. A child ran between them, chasing a balloon, laughter echoing. The world nudged them closer to reality again. Stella exhaled softly. We don't have to make a decision tonight. Marcus nodded. I know. But, she continued, we do have to be honest about where we stand. They stood facing each other, the lights above them flickering softly, casting warm shadows across their faces. Marcus took a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. I want a future with you, he said quietly, but I want it built on the right foundation, not the one I broke. Stella's eyes glistened, not with tears, but with clarity. That's the first time you've ever said it that way, she murmured. Because for the first time, Marcus replied, voice steady. I understand what I almost lost. Stella looked away briefly, grounding herself. We can explore what this is, she said, slowly, carefully, without pretending the past didn't happen. He nodded. No pretending, no shortcuts. Exactly. They both fell silent again as a soft wave of festival music drifted toward them. Marcus looked at Stella, at her resolve, her strength, her vulnerability tucked beneath layers of growth, and felt something shift inside him. Not hope. Responsibility. Forgiveness isn't about wiping the slate clean. It's about deciding whether the person who hurt you is willing and able to grow into someone who won't repeat the cycle. And the truth about love is this: sometimes the hardest part isn't letting go. It's letting someone try again while protecting your own heart. Stella lifted her eyes back to Marcus. We're not ending this, she said gently. But we're not rushing into anything either. We're choosing awareness. And time, Marcus added. And time, she echoed. For the first time since everything fell apart, neither of them felt panic, or pressure, or confusion. They simply felt honest. And honesty, real honesty, had always been the one thing capable of reopening wounds, or helping them finally heal. The night of the festival stayed with Stella long after she went home. She sat on the edge of her bed, the faint glow of her bedside lamp casting soft shadows around the room. Her mind replayed the moment she and Marcus stood face to face, the honesty in his eyes, the pain he tried to hide, the vulnerability she didn't expect. She had seen regret before. She had seen longing. But what she'd seen in Marcus was something deeper, a man trying to confront himself, not just win her back. Still, the part of her that had been hurt didn't fade easily. She reached for a blanket and wrapped it around her shoulders, staring at the quiet room. The peace she had built for herself felt steady, and yet part of her heart trembled with questions she wasn't ready to ask. She wasn't afraid of Marcus. She was afraid of losing herself again. Her phone buzzed. A message from him. Can we talk tomorrow? Really talk? She read it 3 times before setting the phone down. Not yes. Not no. Just space. The next afternoon, Stella agreed to meet him, not at his place, not at hers, but at a small park in Midtown Atlanta, where the sound of moving water from a nearby fountain softened the tension in the air. She arrived first. Marcus arrived a few minutes later, walking slowly, carefully, as if unsure whether he had the right to approach her at all. When their eyes met, Marcus swallowed hard. Thank you for meeting me, he said quietly. Stella nodded. I figured it was time. They sat on a bench under the shade of a large tree. People walked by, joggers, families, couples, but their world narrowed again, just as it had at the festival. Marcus took a slow breath. I need to tell you the truth about the call. Stella's hands rested in her lap, fingers laced together. Her face stayed calm, but her eyes sharpened just slightly, not out of anger but readiness. She had been waiting for this moment. "I'm listening," she said softly. Marcus looked down at his hands, collecting his thoughts before speaking. When the call came, it wasn't about getting back together. He paused, forcing himself to continue. "It wasn't romantic. It wasn't some secret plan I kept from you." Stella held his gaze, expression unreadable. "She reached out because she heard something about my family," he continued. "Something that brought up old memories. It wasn't about her. It was about a version of me I never dealt with." Stella didn't speak. She let him finish. "I didn't answer because I wanted her," he said. "I answered because I panicked. Because I have this habit of running toward old places when I'm scared." He exhaled deeply. "And I'm ashamed of that." The words hung heavy in the air. Stella's heart tightened, not with jealousy or rage, but with the weight of finally hearing what she had feared and what she hadn't understood. Marcus turned toward her. "I wasn't choosing her over you," he said. "I was choosing fear, and I should have chosen you instead." Stella felt her chest rise slowly, her breath held tight. Her voice was calm when she finally spoke. "I appreciate the truth. But that morning, it felt like I didn't matter." "I know," he whispered. "I made you feel replaceable, and that's something I can never take back." Silence settled again, but this silence wasn't empty. It was full of everything they had never said before. Stella looked at him, seeing the tension in his shoulders soften into something more painful than defensiveness, accountability. "Marcus," she said quietly, "I didn't leave because you made a mistake. I left because that mistake revealed a pattern I couldn't live with." He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "I know, and I'm finally seeing how deep that pattern runs," she continued, voice steady but gentle. "You weren't emotionally present. You weren't building a life with me. You were surviving one with yourself." Marcus's throat tightened. Her words weren't meant to wound, but they cut straight to the truth. "I don't want to be that man anymore," he whispered. Stella looked away briefly, letting his words settle in her chest. She felt the old desire, the part of her that had once dreamed of forever with him, stir faintly. But alongside it was the new part of her, the part that had grown, strengthened, healed. That part whispered, "Be careful." Marcus watched her closely, not with desperation, with honesty. "I'm not here to ask you to come back," he said. "I'm here to ask for a chance to show you I can grow." Stella turned toward him fully, eyes softened with a mixture of longing and doubt. "I want to believe you," she said quietly. "I really do." He leaned forward slightly, voice steady. "Then let me earn it." Her breath caught, not because of his words, but because for the first time, Marcus wasn't offering promises. He was offering effort. Stella felt a deep conflict move through her, a pull between trust and desire, between the woman she had been and the woman she was becoming. She whispered, "I'm afraid of wanting you again." Marcus closed his eyes, pained. "I'm afraid of losing the chance to try." Love becomes real when two people stop performing and start telling the truth, not the pretty truth, but the truth that risks everything. Stella breathed out slowly. "I'm not giving you an answer today," she said, "but I'm giving you a beginning." Marcus's eyes lifted, hope flickering quietly inside them. "And beginnings," she added gently, "are more honest than promises." The days that followed their conversation in the park moved gently, with a different kind of rhythm, not rush, not heavy, but intentional. Something had shifted between Stella and Marcus, not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, steady way that felt more real than anything they had before. They weren't back together. They weren't starting fresh. They were learning each other again, slowly. Stella returned to her routines, her morning walks, her quiet evenings, her small joys, but something new settled into her days, space for possibility. Not commitment, not certainty, just space. Marcus respected that space with a discipline she had never seen from him before. He didn't overwhelm her with messages. He didn't pressure her for answers. He showed up gently and genuinely. Some mornings he sent her a simple text, "Hope your day starts peaceful." On others, "Thinking of you, not asking for anything, just wanted you to know." Stella found herself smiling at her phone more often than she expected, not because his messages were grand, but because they were steady, thoughtful, consistent. She began responding in her own time, "Thank you," wishing the same for you. Today was good. Small steps, unrushed steps. A week later, Stella agreed to meet him for coffee. Neutral ground, daylight, public, simple. A safe space to explore connection without pressure. They chose a small cafe near Piedmont Park with wooden tables and warm lighting. The windows fogged slightly from the steam of espresso machines, making the space feel cozy and natural. Marcus arrived a few minutes early and waited at a table near the window. When Stella walked in, wrapped in a soft sweater, her hair catching the afternoon light, something in him softened instantly. He stood up without thinking. She gave a small smile. They both sat. "Thanks for meeting me," he said. "Thanks for asking in a way that felt comfortable," she replied. Their drinks came, a latte for her, black coffee for him, and for a moment they said nothing, letting the familiarity of each other's presence settle naturally between them. Stella stirred her latte slowly. "This feels different." Marcus nodded. "It is different." She glanced at him. "You seem calmer." "I'm trying to be more present," he admitted. "Not just with you. With myself." Stella appreciated that answer more than he realized. She leaned back in her chair, relaxing her shoulders slightly. "What does that look like?" she asked. Marcus exhaled thoughtfully. "It looks like not running from discomfort, not choosing silence when I need to speak, not reaching back into the past when the present gets hard." Stella looked at him longer this time, not evaluating him, but seeing him, seeing how much he was trying, seeing how much he still had to work through, seeing, most of all, that his effort wasn't performative. It was living in him. She nodded gently. "That matters." Her voice had a warmth to it that Marcus hadn't heard in months. He didn't mistake it for commitment. He didn't cling to it. He simply absorbed it like sunlight. After coffee, they walked through the park. Not too close, not too distant. A careful balance that matched exactly where they were emotionally. The wind carried the faint scent of grass and food truck spices. Children played nearby. Couples strolled hand in hand, and the world felt soft around them. They paused near a small lake where ducks drifted across the water. "I forgot how peaceful this place is," Stella said. Marcus glanced at her, smiling softly. "I used to come here when I needed to think." "You think?" she teased lightly. It was the first playful tone she had given him since everything happened. Marcus laughed quietly. "Yeah, I'm learning. I can see that." The simplicity of the moment grounded them. No tension, no weight, just presence. Marcus cleared his throat gently. "Can I ask you something?" Stella nodded. "Do you feel anything between us right now? Not pressure, not obligation, just anything?" She didn't rush her answer. She looked out at the water, watching the gentle ripples. "Yes," she said finally. "I feel something." Marcus's breath caught, but Stella continued. "But it's different now. It's steadier, softer, and it needs time." He nodded slowly. "I'm okay with time." "I know," she said, turning toward him. "And that's why I'm open to whatever this becomes." Marcus's expression softened deeply, not with relief but with gratitude. "Stella, I don't deserve another chance, but I want to earn one." "You're not earning a chance," she corrected softly. "You're earning trust. Those aren't the same thing." He nodded again. She could see him absorbing the lesson, accepting the responsibility of it. They continued walking until Stella slowed, stopping near a bench overlooking the water. "Let's sit for a moment," she said. Marcus sat beside her, leaving a respectful gap, but close enough that their presence felt shared. She spoke first. "When I walked away, I did it because I needed to protect myself, not because I stopped caring." Marcus looked at her gently. "I never stopped caring either." "I know," she said quietly. "But caring isn't enough. Not without growth." He swallowed hard. "I'm trying." "I can see that," she repeated, her tone even more tender this time. A silence settled between them, warm instead of cold. Stella felt that familiar pull, not the one that hurt her before, but a new one shaped by honesty. She rested her hand lightly on the bench between them, not touching him, just closer. Marcus saw the gesture, understood it instantly, and didn't reach for more than what she offered. They sat like that, two people with history behind them and possibility ahead of them, sharing a quiet moment that felt more intimate than any embrace. Love rebuilt slowly is stronger than love rushed quickly. When two people choose patience over impulse, honesty over performance, and growth over repetition, that's when something real begins. Stella took a deep breath, letting her shoulders relax fully for the first time. Marcus turned toward her. "Whatever this becomes, I want it to be healthy, for both of us." Stella nodded, her voice soft. Then let's build it slowly. And for the first time, their hearts moved forward without fear, not because the past was forgotten, but because they were finally learning how to move beyond it, together. In the weeks that followed their walk in the park, Stella and Marcus fell into a quiet, steady rhythm, something neither of them had experienced before. Not intensity, not infatuation, not chaos, just consistency. They spoke every few days, never overwhelming each other. They met for simple things, a walk, a short coffee, a shared moment of peace. Each time, they learned something new about one another and about themselves. For the first time, their connection felt like something built carefully, not clung to desperately. Stella felt herself shifting, not backward into old emotions, but forward into something deeper. She wasn't falling fast. She was allowing herself to feel slowly, without fear. Marcus, on the other hand, felt something else entirely, a steady, growing clarity. He had loved Stella before, but he had not understood what love required. This time he chose understanding over impulse, presence over panic, honesty over avoidance. And it showed. One Friday evening, Marcus texted, "I'd love to see you this weekend, only if you feel comfortable." Stella stared at the message thoughtfully. She wasn't anxious. She wasn't conflicted. She simply felt ready for a deeper conversation. She replied, "Let's meet tomorrow, somewhere calm." Marcus suggested a botanical garden on the edge of the city, a quiet place full of winding paths, blooming flowers, and open lawns. Stella agreed. The next day, they walked side by side through rows of tulips and gentle greenery. The late afternoon sunlight wrapped everything in a warm glow. It was peaceful, grounded, alive. They found a bench tucked beneath a willow tree, its branches swaying gently in the breeze. Stella sat first, running her fingers lightly along the bench's wooden edge. Marcus sat beside her, close enough to feel her presence but not invade her space. "Stella," he said softly, "there's something I want to tell you, something I didn't understand until recently." She turned slightly, listening. He took a breath. "I spent a long time chasing old versions of myself, versions shaped by pressure, by expectation, by what I thought I owed to people who weren't even in my life anymore." Stella's expression remained calm, open. "I used to think stability meant settling," he admitted. "I didn't realize it meant choosing the right person and building something consistent with them." He paused, voice softening. "And you were the only person I ever felt that with." Stella felt a warmth move through her chest, not overwhelming but gentle, like a truth she had always known but had never heard spoken aloud. "But there's more," Marcus said, eyes dropping for a moment. "I recently went back through some of my old things, photos, messages, things I hadn't touched in years. I thought it would help me understand why I reacted the way I did when the call came." Stella watched him closely. "And I realized the truth," he said. "I wasn't drawn to the call because of her. I was drawn to it because I never believed I deserved something healthy, something real, something like you." Stella's breath caught softly, not because of the confession itself, but because she recognized the vulnerability in it. "So the twist," Marcus continued, "is that I didn't choose her. I chose the version of me that kept running from what was good." He looked at her then, fully, sincerely. "And I'm done running." Silence wrapped around them like soft cloth. The branches above shifted with the breeze. A bird called somewhere in the distance. Stella spoke after a long moment. "Marcus, I'm proud of you." The words were simple, but the impact was profound. Marcus's shoulders dropped slightly, as if a weight he had carried for years finally loosened. "But," Stella added gently, "you don't need to prove anything to me. Your growth is yours, not mine to validate." He nodded, understanding the message behind her words. Her love couldn't be earned through performance, only through presence. "So, where does that leave us?" he asked softly. Stella turned toward him, legs angled slightly in his direction, eyes warm. "It leaves us here," she said, "choosing the next step together. Not rushing, not pretending the past never happened, but choosing to build something new." Marcus felt his chest tighten, not with fear, but with gratitude. "Does that mean you want to try again?" he asked. Stella smiled, a soft, grounded smile that held both tenderness and certainty. "It means I'm willing," she said, "and that I believe we can build something better than what we had before." Marcus's eyes glistened, emotion tightening his voice. "I won't waste this chance." "I know," Stella whispered. Without thinking, her hand gently brushed his, just a light touch, a small gesture of closeness. Marcus didn't grab it, didn't pull her closer. He simply turned his palm upward, allowing her to choose whether the touch would stay. She let her hand rest in his. Not a grip, not a claim, just connection. A new beginning, held lightly. Love didn't return to Stella and Marcus because they forced it. It returned because they grew into the version of themselves capable of holding it without breaking. Sometimes the real twist isn't the reunion, it's the transformation. Two people choosing each other again. Not out of fear of being alone, not out of nostalgia, not out of unfinished stories, but because they finally learned the truth. Love thrives when honesty replaces ego, when growth replaces denial, and when care replaces excuses. As Stella and Marcus sat beneath the willow tree, hands gently touching, the world around them seemed to soften. They weren't promising forever. They weren't pretending the past didn't hurt. They were doing something rarer, choosing the present with clarity, courage, and care. And sometimes, that's exactly how love comes back, not in a rush, not in a blaze, but in a steady return, quiet and true, like a heart finding its way home.